Imagine this: the most powerful empire on Earth, unmatched military, global trade dominance, a currency everyone trusts. From the outside, Rome looked unstoppable. No enemy could defeat it head-on. No rival could match its reach. And yet, Rome collapsed anyway, not because it lost a war, not because barbarians were stronger, but because Rome made one decision that looked smart, felt necessary, and slowly destroyed everything. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Rome didn't fall suddenly. It rotted while still winning. And the most dangerous part? America is making the same mistake right now. Different century, different technology, same pattern. This isn't a history lesson. This is a warning. At its peak, the Roman Empire controlled nearly 25% of the world's population. Its roads connected continents. Its armies enforced peace. Its currency, the denarius, was trusted across borders. Rome didn't look fragile. It looked eternal. And that's exactly when the mistake began. Rome believed one thing: as long as we control more territory, we remain powerful. So it expanded. More borders to defend, more soldiers to pay, more logistics, more administration. At first, expansion paid for itself. Conquered lands brought gold, slaves, taxes, resources. The system worked. Until it didn't. Because every new territory added cost, not just wealth. Rome now had to defend longer borders, fund a larger military, suppress rebellions, maintain infrastructure. Power stopped being profitable. It became expensive. Here's where most people get it wrong. Rome didn't run out of enemies. Rome ran out of money it could trust. To keep the empire functioning, Rome faced a choice: raise taxes further or create more money. They chose the second, quietly, gradually, dangerously. The silver content of Roman coins was reduced again and again and again. On paper, nothing changed. Coins looked the same. The empire looked strong. The army kept marching. But confidence was leaking out of the system. People noticed prices rising. Merchants demanded more coins for the same goods. Soldiers wanted higher pay. Trust began to crack. And once trust cracks in a system built on belief, collapse becomes inevitable. Rome was still powerful, but it was no longer credible. And that distinction matters more than armies. Rome didn't collapse the moment it debased its currency. That's the part most people misunderstand. At first, nothing dramatic happened. Markets stayed open. Armies kept moving. The empire still looked powerful. That's because currency collapse never starts loudly. It starts quietly, inside trust. When Rome reduced silver in its coins, it told itself a comforting lie. We're not cheating the system, we're just buying time. And for a while, it worked. More coins were minted, soldiers were paid, borders were held. But something invisible was breaking. Money stopped representing value. It started representing promise. And promises only work as long as people believe them. Merchants noticed first. Prices rose, not because goods were scarce, but because coins were weaker. Soldiers noticed next. They demanded higher wages, not greed, but survival. Citizens noticed last. Food became expensive. Taxes increased. Savings lost purchasing power. Rome responded the only way pressured systems always do: more control, more force, more spending, which required more money creation. This is the loop that destroys empires, not collapse, acceleration. Now, pause and look at modern America. The US dollar is not backed by silver or gold. It's backed by confidence. Confidence that US debt will be paid, inflation will be controlled, growth will continue, institutions will hold. For decades, this worked because America had productivity, global trust, reserve currency status. But pressure has changed the equation. Wars became longer, global commitments expanded, social spending exploded, debt climbed quietly, and instead of raising taxes sharply, politically impossible, America did what Rome did. It expanded the money supply, quantitative easing, emergency stimulus, trillions created digitally. Again, not evil, not reckless, necessary. That's what makes it dangerous, because empires don't fall from bad intentions. They fall from reasonable decisions under pressure. At first, inflation was called temporary, then transitory, then manageable. But prices don't care about language. Rent rose, food rose, energy rose, wages lagged. Confidence started thinning, not panic, not collapse, erosion. And erosion doesn't look scary until it's too late. Here's the key parallel. Rome didn't lose because it ran out of money. It lost because money stopped being trusted as a measure of reality. When that happens, long-term planning dies, savings evaporate, political anger rises, loyalty fades. The empire still exists. But it's hollow, and once hollow, every external shock hits harder. This is why history doesn't repeat through invasion. It repeats through currency stress. Rome didn't fall because it lost a single war. It fell because it tried to hold too many places at once. At its peak, Rome controlled territory stretching from Britain to the Middle East. On maps, it looked unstoppable. In reality, it was fragile. Every border needed soldiers. Every road needed maintenance. Every province needed administration. Power wasn't free. It was expensive. Rome believed something dangerous. If we withdraw, everything collapses. So it didn't withdraw. It doubled down. More legions, more forts, more logistics, which meant more spending, which meant more taxes, which meant more pressure on the economy. Sound familiar? Now look at the United States. America doesn't rule territory the way Rome did. It rules systems. Military bases in 70-plus countries, security guarantees across Europe and Asia, control of sea lanes, airspace, satellites, responsibility for global stability. The world doesn't see this as occupation. It sees it as order. But order has a cost, and America pays most of it. Here's the uncomfortable truth. The U.S. military isn't expensive because it's inefficient. It's expensive because it's everywhere. Every carrier group, every overseas base, every defense commitment, all justified, all strategic, all costly. And like Rome, America told itself, this is the price of leadership. At first, the economy could absorb it. Growth was strong. Debt was manageable. The dollar was trusted. But over time, commitments grew faster than capacity. New threats appeared. Old conflicts never ended. Allies depended more. Rivals tested limits. So the U.S. didn't pull back. It expanded. More defense budgets, more foreign aid, more emergency funding, more debt. Again, not reckless. Reactive. That's the pattern. Rome didn't overspend because it was arrogant. It overspent because retreat felt more dangerous than expansion. And that's the trap. Because when an empire reaches the point where every position feels non-negotiable, flexibility disappears. Everything becomes existential. This is where global overstretch becomes fatal. Not instantly, gradually. Citizens start asking questions. Why are taxes rising? Why are services declining? Why is infrastructure aging? Why are foreign commitments endless? Rome faced this too. People didn't revolt at first. They disengaged. They avoided taxes. They avoided service. They stopped believing the empire served them. That's when loyalty broke. And when loyalty breaks, power becomes force. Force is expensive, which feeds the cycle again. Here's the key insight. Empires don't collapse because they are weak. They collapse because they cannot prioritize anymore. Everything feels essential. Everything feels urgent. Everything feels like the last line of defense. America is approaching that moment, not because it wants to dominate the world, but because the world expects it to hold everything together. Rome faced the same expectation, and it broke under the weight of it. This is the phase empires fear most. Not invasion, not rebellion, division. Rome didn't collapse the moment its economy strained. It collapsed when its people stopped agreeing on what Rome was. The empire still had legions, still had gold, still had walls. But it lost something more important, a shared belief in the system. Citizens began identifying as provinces first, classes first, factions first. Rome became powerful, some, but fragmented. Now, look at America. From the outside, the U.S. looks unified. One flag, one military, one currency. But internally, the country is polarized in ways it hasn't seen for generations. Politics isn't disagreement anymore, it's identity. Institutions aren't trusted universally. Media isn't believed collectively. Facts are negotiated, not accepted. This matters more than people realize. Because empires don't function on force alone. They function on voluntary cooperation. Taxes paid willingly, laws respected, sacrifice accepted. Rome lost that first. Not because people hated Rome, but because they stopped seeing themselves in it. When that happens, leaders face a brutal choice. Rebuild trust or compensate with control. Rome chose control. More surveillance, more punishments, more crackdowns, short-term stability, long-term decay. The United States hasn't chosen force, but it is compensating. Through emergency powers, financial intervention, debt expansion, information control, institutional insulation. Again, not malicious, defensive. This is what systems do when consensus weakens. They harden, and hardened systems don't bend. They crack. Another parallel. As Rome's internal unity declined, its leaders leaned harder on external threats. Barbarians, enemies, traitors. Not always real, but politically useful. Fear creates temporary unity, but it burns credibility. America is entering a similar cycle. External competition with China, conflict narratives, economic warfare, security framing. Some threats are real, but their political use matters. Because when leaders rely on external pressure to maintain internal cohesion, they narrow their options. Backing down looks like weakness. Compromise looks like surrender. That's when mistakes compound. Rome's final centuries weren't chaotic. They were rigid. Rules multiplied, taxes increased, bureaucracy expanded. Military loyalty shifted from the state to commanders. Everything looked organized, until it wasn't. The most dangerous sign isn't disorder, it's overorder. When systems try to control too much because they trust too little, America isn't collapsing, but it is hardening. And history shows, hardening is what comes just before fracture. Rome did not fall because it lacked power. It fell because it lost flexibility. By the end, Rome still had armies, laws, borders, emperors. What it no longer had was room to change. Every solution required more control. Every reform threatened existing power. Every delay made the next decision harder. So Rome kept choosing the option that bought time, not the one that restored balance. That is the real final mistake. Not corruption, not invasion, not decadence, delay. Now look at America. The United States is not Rome. History never repeats perfectly, but systems behave similarly under pressure. America still has a choice Rome no longer had. And it comes down to one question. Will the system adapt early or enforce late? Because here's the truth history teaches very clearly. Empires don't collapse when problems appear. They collapse when problems become politically impossible to fix. Rome knew it needed tax reform, military restructuring, currency stability, reduced expansion. But every reform threatened someone powerful, so nothing fundamental changed. America faces similar crossroads: debt versus growth, stability versus innovation, global leadership versus domestic cohesion, influence versus affordability. None of these are unsolvable, but solving them requires shared sacrifice, and shared sacrifice requires trust. That's the fragile variable. Rome lost trust before it lost territory. Once citizens believed the system worked for others, not for them, cooperation ended, and no empire survives without voluntary participation. This is the final warning Rome gives America. Power can buy time, money can buy stability, force can buy obedience, but only trust buys longevity. If America rebuilds trust between institutions and people, between growth and fairness, between leadership and legitimacy, this story does not have to repeat. But if problems are postponed, masked, or managed only through control, then history doesn't need enemies. It finishes the job quietly. Rome didn't fall in a single moment. It faded, hardened, and then fractured. America is not there, but it is closer to the decision point than most people realize. History isn't predicting America's fall. It's offering a mirror. The question is simple. Will America look or look away? If you want more long-form, no-noise documentaries connecting history, power, and modern America, subscribe to the channel.